Hallo, guten Tag, willkommen. Ich heiße Helmut Krank und Müde. I am spokesperson for German Chancellor Friedrich Merz. However, deshalb, today I have the privilege of hosting the podcast of mein guter Freund David Debato, the No Delusion Zone. And I also have the privilege and honor of interviewing another guter Freund, mein Stammtischbruder, General Ben Hodges. General Hodges is the former Kommandeur US Army Europa. And as I said, he is ein guter Freund and geopolitical analyst. So as they say, without further ado, Ben, willkommen to the No Delusion Zone.
Herzlichen Dank für diese Einladung. Thanks for the invitation.
It's my pleasure, as I said. So we have so much ground to cover, and as usual, not enough time. So let me get right to it. Let's start immediately with what you would call a sit rep, and tell us the current situation on the ground in Ukraine vis-a-vis the aggressor, Russian aggressor, and what the current status is on the battlefield, if you could, bitte.
Yeah. So three things. Of course, if you're at the tactical level in the vicinity of Pokrovsk, for example, it's very, very difficult. I mean, you're getting attacked every day. Russians are pushing very hard to try and encircle Pokrovsk. That would not be decisive, but it would create problems. But the main thing that Putin wants is momentum, or the perception that he is making progress, and that therefore it's useless to try to help Ukraine to stop them. So that's one part. And Pokrovsk is not fallen yet. The Russians have been trying for almost a year and a half, but it's difficult if you're a Ukrainian soldier there. The second sort of facet of this, of course, is if you're a Ukrainian civilian, it's terrible. More than 200 drones every night, plus ballistic missiles, plus glide bombs, are targeting cities, specifically medical facilities, but also apartments, etc. This is a deliberate targeting of the civilian population in Ukraine. Ukraine is able to intercept or shoot down or block most of these, but the numbers are so significant that they still have several that will get through and kill innocent people. The third thing, though, to keep in mind is if you can step back from those two tactical things, the fact is Russia still does not have the ability to overrun or overwhelm Ukrainian defenders. They have their own problems, and they have shown to be very vulnerable when Ukraine is able to use long-range precision weapons against Russian logistics or Russian industry. They're very vulnerable. So the Ukrainians just need more of that capability.
Would you say that the Russian tactics or strategy has changed in the last 2 or 3 months, or whether they are still pursuing their meat grinder strategy, especially in the northeast area of Ukraine?
Yeah, I think they are still using this because it doesn't cost them anything in terms of, I mean, they don't care about their own casualties. What Vladimir Putin knows is that he cannot win by overwhelming Ukrainian defenders. His only chance of winning is that if the US, Canada, Europe turn their backs on Ukraine, that if we quit supporting, if we don't do anything, then for Putin, he needs to continue the pressure on Ukraine. It's a war of attrition, obviously, at that point, and to prevent Ukraine from being able to launch counterstrikes. So tactically, it has not changed. I think the Russians have gotten better at their ability to produce and employ drones on a nightly basis. I mean, the scale is much different than it was even just a couple of months ago. And they do anticipate about 30,000 North Korean soldiers that will be employed soon. And the Ukrainian officer with whom I speak the most it has indicated to me that they think that the North Koreans are also getting better, that they will be more effective than the first batch was. And 30,000 is not an inconsequential number.
Yeah, 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 yeah. Let me ask you something. I would circle back to Germany. I want to focus a lot on what is happening here in Germany in terms of our support or lack thereof for Ukraine. But let me ask you about President Trump. Do you feel that he has had a real turn around, the change of opinion recently with Putin and his support for Ukraine, or whether this is just a temporary occurrence, or whether this is just some, as I would say, richtiges Scheiße?
I would say this is more richtiges Scheiße than it is a real turnaround. This and that big announcement he made 2 weeks ago with Secretary General Ruta sitting by his side in the Oval Office, and he starts off by saying, I've told the Russians they have 50 days to." And my first response was, "Why 50 days? What you think they're going to change their mind in 7 weeks?" In fact, what the president did was greenlight the Kremlin to say, "Okay, you got 7 weeks to do what you want without two. We're not going to do new things." And it really, I thought was I shouldn't say it was disappointing because I did not expect him to do something really serious. But nonetheless, it's disheartening when the American president is clearly unwilling, despite all this tough talk with every other nation, including our allies in Europe. Um, how many times has he said, "Well, in 2 weeks we'll see," or "In 2 weeks we'll see"? The Kremlin sees that. So I don't think they have any concern about, this administration taking serious steps. It's been 7 weeks. We're now at about 5 weeks until this supposed ultimatum. The Russians have given zero indication that they're concerned about that. In fact, the number of attacks on Ukrainian civilians has increased since that big announcement. I think for Trump, this was a business thing. For him, he probably looks at it. He created more opportunities for Europe to buy American weapon systems. That's the extent of it. Now, if you're searching for, and I do have some good friends that are as tough on Russia as I am and that care as much about Ukraine as I do, that look for a silver lining somewhere, it's like, well, at least he's allowing Europeans now to buy stuff that they can then give or hand over to Ukraine. Actually, Rubio had already said that weeks before. So even this is not actually something new. And we'll see how fast this makes a difference. There's different reports about how soon Germany could hand over Patriot launchers and interceptors. There's a lot of confusing information out there, which maybe you could help me understand what the real truth is. The problem is, of course, as much as I think Patriot is best in class for what it was designed, it does nothing against drones. And so the failure of the White House to commit to helping Ukraine defeat Russia's attacks against civilians, both with capabilities, but also the capability to strike deep, to kill the Archer, to hit the factories where Russians are now making Shahed drones. That would have been significant. But of course, he didn't do any of that.
Well, then let me get right to Deutschland, to Germany, and the support, or as I said, lack thereof for Ukraine. Let's talk specifically, and there's been much in the news recently about new, not new weapon systems from Germany for Ukraine. If you could, Ben, speak to us about the Iris-T system. What is this? How does it work? How might it help Ukraine? Do they already have this? Or are they getting more? If you could just speak about this weapon system and what it might mean for Ukraine and the current status of supplying Ukraine with this system.
Yeah, so Iris-T is a very good German-produced missile defense system. I don't know how many more that the Germans have on hand or how many might be in production that could eventually go to Ukraine. But again, I personally resist is not the right word, but I don't spend a lot of time dwelling on specific weapon systems, but more on capabilities. And so Iris-T is a good capability to help knock down cruise missiles, airplanes, that sort of thing. But it's not going to do much against the 250, 300 drones every night. So I'm not against it. It's just it is only a small part of what's needed by Ukraine, both to intercept arrows, but also to kill the archer. Iris-T would be another thing that would help with that, but I couldn't tell you how many might still be in the queue. And of
Well,
course, it's
let me
not
get
cheap.
right to the I think the core of the problem here, and I would like to get your honest opinion of Chancellor Merz. Now, remember, er ist mein Chef, mein Boss, so please seien Sie nett a little bit, but I want you to be honest with me about Chancellor Merz. Has he been good? Has he been bad? Is he brave? Is he coward? What is he doing for the support of Ukraine? What is he doing for support of Europa, for Europe, and for Deutschland, for Germany? Is he a good chancellor? What is your opinion? How has he been? And what do you see him doing in this situation in the future?
Yeah, I would give him a B plus so far. Uh, he is so much better than his two predecessors, Olaf Scholz and Angela Merkel, because he is very clear about the importance of supporting Ukraine, that Russia is the aggressor. There's no wavering or there's no namby-pamby, which is a very sophisticated American phrase for waffling and wishy-washy. So he's very clear about that. Um, he was clever enough to work before he became the Bundeskanzler to get the law changed to allow significant, huge increases in German defense spending as well as infrastructure. That's not inconsequential. That's certainly not what the Kremlin would have wanted to see was Germany becoming, once again, a strong military force in Europe. And it also is what Germany should be doing, which is leading by example, as you well know, Helmut, that the Germans don't like the L word. They want to be leading Europe. They have this, you have this historical issue with that, but leading by example is a different thing. And I think this is where the German Bundeskanzler is attempting, what he's attempting to do is lead by example, both in terms of defense industry growth, Bundeswehr growth, and he's been very vocal about helping invest in Ukraine's defense industry, specifically with technologies to help with long-range precision strike. The reason I stopped short of saying he's an A is because he has not delivered Taurus. I mean, Taurus is not magical, but it has taken on mythological proportions or it's described in a way that it could do all these things. And it would be a very welcome addition to Ukraine's capabilities. And he had said he was going to do it, and he hasn't done it. Now, I think, as you would know, this is probably part of the inherent weakness of having a very uh, fragile coalition and a coalition government where you can't afford to lose. And I think he's the left side of his coalition, the left side of the SPD, are dead set against it. And I think that's probably why we haven't gotten there yet.
Well, let me say that my good friend David Debato has far less patience than I do with European leaders, including mein Chef, Chancellor Merz. And so let me speak for him. And Chancellor Merz, if you are listening, this is David Debato opinion. It is not mine. I merely am his spokesperson in this instance. David Debato would say that Chancellor Merz is being a coward, that like many of his European leaders, he has not yet had the conversation with the German people, the honest conversation with the German people about what is going on, the existential danger that is happening now in Europe, that after Ukraine, and Putin does want all of Ukraine, no matter what is said in propaganda, he is going to attack Europe, whether it starts in Moldova, whether it starts in the Baltics, he eventually will attack all of Europe. He wants the Warsaw Pact again. He wants Soviet Union 2.0 back again. And Chancellor Merz, and again, this is from David D'Amato, Chancellor, not from Nish. He has not had this honest conversation, and this is the problem. They are not anywhere near a wartime footing, and they need to be. So please, if you could say something before I get myself into more trouble.
I think that this is everything, all of your accusations are fair and accurate, except for the part that he's a coward. I would not say that. I think he
This
does
is not
need to
this
do.
is not me. This is my friend. I have not said
I
this.
know. So I'm talking to David through you.
Ja, vielen Dank, vielen Dank.
I feel like I've got my hands on a Ouija board. Here I'm communicating with somebody else. The Bundeskanzler has got to speak to the German population in a very clear way, treat them like adults. And I think that most Germans, certainly the ones that I encounter on a daily basis, would agree that with all that you said, that Russia is the threat, and that this is not something that you can wish away. I think a lot of Germans feel betrayed almost by the Russians, that they really thought over decades after the war that by having strong economic relationships and cultural relationships, that the Russians would in fact be more respectful of European norms and international norms, and it's turned out that the Russians actually, at the end of the day, don't give a damn about all of that. And I do think some Germans feel betrayed and angry.
Do you feel this conversation is going to happen in the near future, or is there going to be a continual, as my friend David would say, an atmosphere of denial about how serious this danger is?
Well, I doubt it's going to happen in the next few weeks because most of Europe and certainly most of Germany is on summer holiday right now. Now, you could say, wait a minute, they're on holiday? Yeah, of course. Germans have never been reluctant, or most Europeans, they're not reluctant to go on holiday, no matter what else is going on. It's a constitutional right. And so the various 16 Bundesländer, the states that make up the German Federal Republic, they have kind of a staggered system where two, three, four of them will start their summer break, and then the next, and so on. So this will be going on up through the first week of September. So something so significant, unlike DC, when they want to roll out bad news, they do it late on a Friday evening. For Germany, I think the Bundeskanzler would wait until he has best possible audience. I think he's due to make his annual Bundeskanzler's day to the German people. That probably is at the end of summer, would be my guess. I think so. I guess what I'm saying is I don't anticipate this happening in the next few weeks, not before September. I think it's understandable. Most of the European leaders are waiting to see what the U.S. is going to do. They're still trying to figure out President Trump. The German Bundeskanzler, I think, has had one of the most successful meetings with Trump in the Oval Office. He went in there and was confident, and then went on Fox News right after that, and in English gave a great presentation, a great interview on Fox. So he's not intimidated by Trump, but of course he has to figure out what's best for Germany, and he probably was waiting to see also how the trade negotiations between the United States and the EU are going to turn out. And that was just announced yesterday. So these things don't happen in a vacuum. I know I sound like I'm defending him. I'm not. I wish you would, but I'm trying to think through why hasn't he and when will he?
Before I get back to Ukraine and the situation there, one last question about Germany and Europe in general. Do you feel, if they ever did get the message that they are in existential danger, that they have the capability, the production capability, the industrial capability within 1 year, 1 to 2 years to gear up to a wartime footing to confront any Russian aggression that may happen within the next 1 to 2 years? Or would it take much, much longer than that if they were to start even today?
I would say that on many things, they could make significant increases within a year or two if the resources were put to it, but especially if there was the political will to do it. And by political will, I don't mean just the Bundeskanzler or the British Prime Minister or the French president or whoever saying to their population, it's important, we got to do this, but also changing the laws and regulations required to change the culture, the mindset. I had a meeting earlier today with a couple of scientists who have their own startup for capability that's needed in the Baltic region and in the North Sea. And they acknowledge that most of the universities in Germany do not allow research and development for military purposes. And this varies from state to state, Bundesland to Bundesland, but this is still a fact that this is a holdover from the 1960s, and they don't allow it. Now, if you're talking about political will, then the Bundeskanzler and all the basically the governors of each of these states should be telling universities, okay, that's over. This is about protecting our people. And if we want to protect our people, then we need to have the best possible technologies available to protect our people. So research and development at all these great 60 plus universities in Germany, for military purposes is permitted. In fact, it's encouraged and incentivized. If you don't do that, then not only do you not have the necessary R&D required to rapidly accelerate in terms of precision and artificial intelligence and drones, et cetera, but also it sends a terrible message to young people that there's something bad about defense, something bad about military. And so political will has to translate into changing mindsets. It's not, there's plenty of money. I mean, Germany has hundreds of billions of euro sloshing around now, but got to change the mindset.
General Hodges, Ben, do you agree with the current strategy of the Ukrainian armed forces vis-a-vis their drone attacks into the heartland of Russia? Are they doing the correct thing, or would you believe they should change this somewhat?
I think I 100% support the targeting of Russia's oil and gas infrastructure, their defense industry. If you can hit a factory that makes drones inside Russia, that thing should burn to the ground. Um, I think they have to do that, but they also have to scale up their production of different types of drones so that they can also go after the logistics, the rail transportation infrastructure, all the things that are required to bring ammunition and sustainment forward to these Russian troops that are doing these constant assaults. I mean, this is how you defeat mass, is by destroying headquarters, logistics, airfields. So they need the capability to hit these things wherever they are. And Ukraine has no interest, and they've shown no interest in actually just targeting civilians in Moscow or St. Petersburg, for example. It is all about hitting legitimate targets wherever they are. And what they need is more, not either or.
So you'd believe that Ukraine should be supplied with longer range weapons so they can hit even more factories, logistical centers, aviation fuel dumps, and so forth and so on, further into Russia before they can even make their way into Ukraine.
Absolutely. I had really hoped, uh, in hindsight, I was naive, that when President Trump made his big announcement with Secretary General Ruta those 2 weeks ago, that he was going to include long-range precision strike capability um, in that, more than just the ATACMS or the those things that we're already providing, but something like Tomahawks or JASSMs, things that could be launched from aircraft or from the ground that could hit targets deep inside Russia. Because the only thing that keeps Russia in this war, from a practical standpoint, is their export of oil and gas to China and India. So if we did our part by disrupting the flow of these shadow fleet vessels through the Baltic Sea and the Black Sea, and Ukraine was targeting refineries and all the infrastructure necessary to pump, refine, and export oil and gas, that would have strategic effect. And then the operational effect of long range precision hitting trains, ammunition factories, drone factories, uh, stopping this stuff. You know, your friend Dave Dubato was old enough to have been a young officer back in the day when the U.S. Army in the Cold War, our doctrine was based on uh, having the ability to fight outnumbered and win because we knew that the Soviets outnumbered NATO forces. And we were confident that we could defeat the first echelon and maybe even the second echelon. But by the time the third echelon of Soviet troops arrived, we would be depleted. And so the doctrine became hitting that third echelon deep with air power, with joint effects, so that it never would get to the battlefield. That's what the Ukrainians need now is the equivalent of that.
Do you see any indication from either NATO or EU or America that they are going to be supplying Ukraine in the near future with any of these long-range weapons?
I do not.
Hmm.
I mean, perhaps it's being considered, perhaps it's being discussed. Um, Honestly, it's very difficult to know exactly what the Trump administration is thinking about. Um, and unfortunately, you still have European countries that are waiting around to see if what the U.S. is going to do, hoping that the U.S. is going to solve it.
Ja, das ist aber schade. Okay, recently I saw actually on X, I believe, that you had spoken about the fact that the Ukrainians should consider the strategy from Napoleon Bonaparte and the battle at Waterloo for possible eventual victory over Russian aggression. And I said to myself, what is this? This is ja komisch. This is. Ah, ah. Verzeihung, wrong article. I will start again. Actually, on X, I had read that you had reviewed the report by some folks, actually, which my friend David had interviewed before, and they spoke about possible Ukrainian strategy using siege strategy with modern weapons patterned after the American victory in the Revolutionary War at Yorktown. That is actually what I meant to say. So if you can speak about this article and how this may be employed by the Ukrainians against the Russians.
So actually, when I read that article, I was struck by the comparison or the example of Yorktown because I'm like, what? How can that be? So it was a clever device by those guys to use something that is not automatically intuitive or that is not intuitive. But as I read through it, I thought, well, this makes a lot of sense, and it's kind of what I was just describing to you before this, the idea of isolating Russian forces inside Ukraine, which is what the French and Americans did to the British at Yorktown because of the French control of the waters outside of Yorktown, the Chesapeake, and then American ground forces were able to eventually grind down the British forces that were in Yorktown. So you have to flip your thinking a little bit about in terms of the geometry here. But the fact is, Ukraine doesn't have to go to Moscow. They have no interest in going anywhere inside Russia. For Ukraine, the desired end state is that Russia is forced to live inside its own boundaries. So how do you force Russia to get back on its side of the border. And you do that by consistent, continuous destruction of the logistics that are required for bringing ammunition, rations, fuel, and replacements to Ukraine from Russia. So that's the siege part. And then, of course, going even deeper, and here's where the Yorktown analogy begins to suffer a little bit. But the idea is to still destroy Russia's ability to bring the war into Ukraine. So the Shahed drone factories, the oil and gas infrastructure, all the other things where Russia is able to produce what it needs to fight in Ukraine. So the idea that those two gentlemen put forth was based on making it impossible for Ukraine or for Russia to continue fighting in Ukraine.
And I think for my friend David, I must give a plug to those two gentlemen. This is Mark Toth and Jonathan Sweet, two geopolitical analysts and very smart men. So let me end this with this question for you, Ben. I had also read recently on the internet that you had proposed 3 possible scenarios for Ukrainian victory. If you could elaborate on this, I think my viewers and David's viewers would be very interested in this.
So, of course, I don't have a great record of successfully predicting things in this war. So, what I tried to do is think about, okay, how could it end? What are scenarios where the war could end? Obviously, the best case for I think all of us and people that listen to you would be Russia's forced to live inside its own borders. That the Kremlin realizes there's no way they're going to ever win, and the oligarchs gang up on Putin and say, "Hey, you're killing us. You know, we've lost everything." So that would be the best case scenario. And then once the Russians do pull out, Ukraine continues to grow its defense industry, make itself indigestible for the Russians. The worst case scenario is the opposite. It's where we all quit, we turn our back on Ukraine, and Ukrainians eventually, through a variety of means or reasons, capitulate. And now you've got Russian troops in all the parts of Ukraine that they want, and they are busy absorbing tens of thousands of Ukrainian soldiers into the Russian army, which would then be used in Moldova or Latvia or somewhere else, with these thousands of troops impressed into service. And Russia having a couple of years to finish their modernization or rebuilding what they're doing, and then they launch their next phase. Because I do agree with you and David that the Donbass and Crimea, that will not satisfy Putin. That's not the limit of their appetite. The middle sort of scenario, the one that I think is perhaps most likely, is unfortunately the one that drags out the longest. And it doesn't end with a decisive outcome, but rather some sort of settlement that is forced on the Ukrainians, and they have to accept that Russia keeps what they have. No NATO membership, maybe EU membership, some sort of delivery of aid, but nothing that's going to change anything. And if that's the case, then I think Ukraine will adopt a strategy similar to Israel's, which is a continuous state of war. That doesn't mean there's fighting and assaults every day, but you're continuously rockets, missiles, drones, attacks going on, but continue to grow your defense industry, Ukraine, to strengthen yourself, to become totally indigestible, develop regional relationships with countries that are concerned that if Ukraine does fail, they will suffer, such as Poland. And then the GUR becomes Mossad. and they, on an industrial scale, infiltrate Russia, uh, conduct sabotage on Russia's oil and gas infrastructure and transportation networks, and target senior individuals. And every senior Russian officer that had anything to do with war crimes or the invasion of Ukraine or the killing of innocent people for the rest of their life, they'll be looking over their shoulder and checking under their car, just the way that terrorists, Hezbollah and Iranian terrorists do today.
Well, then you paint a very sober and realistic possibilities for the future of the Ukrainian conflict. And I will tell you and the viewers of this podcast that I'm going to speak with my chef, with my boss, Chancellor Merz, and try to put the fear of God in him, because I am not one of those peaceful 60s type of Germans who wish for flower power and to just lay back and have a beer and schnitzel. No, we need to get more involved in this. And I'm going to speak to him, and if you do speak to him also, tell him I did not say bad things about him, so because he is still my boss.
You can count on it.
Vielen Dank, mein Freund, vielen Dank. Okay, Ben Hodges, thank you very much for a great interview, as always. And for you all that are listening, please support my friend David DeBarto's podcast. Subscribe to his YouTube channel, and more importantly, become a paid subscriber to his podcast on protectingtherepublic.com. That is www.protectingtherepublic.com. Become a paid subscriber. In America, he is the voice of the opposition, and even in Europe, he is the voice of the opposition towards the extreme far right, AfD, all those sorts of bad things. So again, Ben Hodges, thank you very much. Vielen Dank, and I hope we can speak again very, very soon. Auf Wiedersehen.
Schön, auf Wiedersehen. Bis zum nächsten Mal.